In the wake of social media, public figures are expected to be on their best behavior. We're all familiar with cancel culture, which aims to remove public influence from those who inappropriately use it. It's this governing force that doesn't have any sort of figurehead or employees or spoken rules, but it's very effective in keeping celebrities in line. Whenever I see a celebrity and influencer make a really distasteful comment or joke about something serious, I kind of have to step back and remind myself that they probably didn't attain their public figure status through social media itself, but rather through things like being in the music industry or being an actor. Their platform is more just an unavoidable consequence of their fame. I mean, they are not and should not be considered to be experts on some of these more nuanced and serious topics. Their expertise is more in what they do, like being a musician or an athlete or an actress. They also should probably understand, and I think do understand, that they're going to be observed a little bit more closely than just the average Joe on Reddit. But now nearly anybody with internet access can create a public platform for themselves, which just greatly reduces the barrier to entry. And this raises a pretty important question. Should we give bad people platforms? The definition of a bad person is already pretty contentious. We tend to kind of categorize our levels of badness, if you will, in our heads in some sort of hierarchy that's kind of dependent on people's initial conditions, their criminal background, or their circumstances. An important question to ask yourself might be, if somebody engages in harmful activity, does their background excuse them? Societally, we're often a lot more willing to scrutinize those who come from privileged backgrounds rather than those who come from unprivileged ones. I think you can see this pretty easily in the comment section of one of my favorite YouTube channels called Soft White Underbelly, where they interview people from very deeply troubled backgrounds, you might say. And this makes sense. I mean, I've talked about this in my video about why wealth makes people uncomfortable, but if you're given pretty favorable circumstances, people don't want to see you f it up. There's enough disparity in the world that being fortunate enough to become a celebrity who's gifted this financial freedom and a life of luxury makes a lot of people very envious. And there are a lot of people that feel that, well, if they were given an opportunity to have that life of luxury and comfort, and all they had to do was not be a pedophile or pull crypto scams or be anti-Semitic, then, well, they could manage. Contrast that with the characters from Soft White Underbelly, who have a little bit more of this underdog mentality behind them, where you just want to root for them. You want to see them improve their lives. You want to see them do better. So you're a little bit more lenient in overlooking some of the things that they've done in their past, given their circumstances. If somebody's born into a life of crime and hardship, do they bear the same moral responsibilities as somebody born into a privileged one? Philosophers have long debated whether people have full control over their actions. If somebody raised in an abusive household becomes a criminal, are they truly responsible for their actions, or are they just more a product of their environment? There are situations where society labels wealthy individuals who commit crimes as bad a little bit more quickly than those who come from impoverished backgrounds. And this most likely comes from the perception that privilege removes excuses for wrongdoing. But many of these situations are very nuanced. Because, I mean, even if we get past that and we acknowledge the fact that somebody's actions might be influenced from their background, does that then give them a pass to do things? Because I'm not really sure how you properly take into account somebody's background when weighing in their actions. And nuanced situations don't exactly have very one-size-fits-all solutions. If Soft White Underbelly decides to interview a rapist, but they had a traumatic childhood, should that factor into whether they deserve to get a platform or not? If they use their platform for good, then maybe. I mean, there are series on YouTube where bank robbers fully disclose in detail to children how they rob banks and how they ended up in that lifestyle to try and discourage them from making the same choices. Kind of like how some criminals will actually work with branches of law enforcement, going undercover or doing whatever to try and get some sort of adjusted plea deal. And ultimately, society does tend to be a little bit more forgiving towards those who come from more disadvantaged backgrounds. But that doesn't always mean that they should be completely exempt from scrutiny or accountability. And yes, once again, this comes from somebody with an extremely advantaged life. I mean, look, the debate over whether bad people should have platforms is very complicated, but in short, I feel like it's kind of like a to whom much is given, much is expected kind of thing. But we're kind of back at square one, because even though you and I might have very different definitions of what makes somebody a bad person, we still haven't really figured out if once we realize what a bad person person is if they then should deserve to have a platform or not. A major concern in this topic is free speech. And the aisle is somewhat split on this, because some people believe that, well, living in America means that you're signing up for absolute free speech, freedom to express your views no matter how harmful the impact may be, versus some people who think that maybe restrictions on free speech to some degree might actually benefit everybody's safety. Philosopher Brian Leader challenges this idea that free speech is always beneficial. He argues that even though we kind of believe here that the First Amendment is sacrosanct, really speech itself doesn't have that much inherent value. Really, it's just the impact of the words that matter. Leader suggests that when free speech starts to echo all these harmful ideas, it ends up not really being a net positive for society. And I can definitely wrap my head around this idea, but we have to make sure that we're consistent, I think. Well, I personally really enjoy Soft White Underbelly, and I enjoy the fact that they kind of give the opportunity to marginalized groups of people to sit down in the interview chair who don't normally really get that chance. I also kind of see it from the other side, where we're kind of giving a voice to criminals who openly discuss very violent and exploitative behavior. Is the value of their testimony greater than the potential harm of normalizing their actions? This isn't always the case, but we have to consider it when we're weighing the pros and cons of affording privileges like social media or platforms to people who, you know, maybe make music and are like a rapper or something, and who like openly hate Jewish. Kanye West is this rapper who I probably don't have to explain who Kanye West is. It is so f***ing annoying as a Jewish person and a musician that this other musician who is so impactful in music is so anti-Semitic, so openly anti-Semitic. Before all this crazy came out, my band literally did work for his team. We did a cover of Closed on Sunday before the song was even released because his team asked us to do it, and they sent us Yeezys as a reward. And then he just now openly has a t-shirt on his website that just has a swastika on it, and I think it's like the only thing on his website, and it's like $20, and there's some very colorful tweets that he's put out about just openly being a Nazi. Can't wait to monetize this video. But what's more interesting to me than just on its face, this very blatant anti-Semitic rhetoric and behavior, is that I think a lot of people would actually agree with Brian Leader's philosophy that we should probably be deplatforming people like Ye, but then there's also channels like Soft White Underbelly that give a platform of millions of subscribers to KKK members. And thankfully, for me at least, it seems like, you know, the comment sections on these videos are just people kind of echoing the same sentiment, like how gross these KKK members are for the beliefs that they hold. But I just am confused that I don't see anybody talking in the comments about like, it's a little weird that Soft White Underbelly is deciding to even interview these people and give them a chance to speak at all. But full transparency here, I don't really know if they should be deplatformed. I'm not actually suggesting that. I mean, I've watched those videos before. I think they're pretty intriguing, to be honest. But what if Ye had a song that had a feature from a KKK member? We can agree that that would feel like a little different, right? Because on its face, it does seem to be the belief, held by most people at least, that we should be removing platforms for people that echo very harmful and discriminatory beliefs, but we don't seem to be very consistent with our scrutiny. There's also kind of the obvious caveat that's like, well, we're always just refining our societal expectations of people. Cancel culture does change its opinions on people when new information is presented. I mean, look at the Quiet on Set thing with Drake Bell. I mean, the Western world has barely been around, 50 years or something without openly discriminatory legislation, and frankly, I'm not even so sure that we've really reached that yet. And social media hasn't even been around for 20 of those 50 years? I mean, there's clearly a lot more refining to be done. I mean, imagine if X or Twitter or whatever was around in the 1940s. Would Jewish users be getting deplatformed because of the rise of anti-Semitism? Would we have had the benefit of time in the context of human existence to have not allowed slave-holding presidents to have Instagram? Again, those things might sound silly, but we still don't have it figured out. I mean, there are people who have access to massive platforms on social media that hold positions of power in United States government that have lengthy criminal backgrounds. I mean, clearly we're not all on the same page about how to handle social media. And I don't, unfortunately, know what the answer is to kind of handle this crisis of consistency across platforms problem is, but I think that we're walking on thin ice. Sometimes I like to think about it like if I was a parent and my child's school was hosting some sort of assembly and they were asking about who they wanted to be the guest speaker. Would you rather have Kanye West there, but he's only talking about beat making and entrepreneurship in the music industry? Or would you rather have the KKK members from Soft White Underbelly there who are talking about how important it is places to eat your fruits and vegetables? Or would you rather have Mark Leda there, who's the producer of Soft White Underbelly, to talk to you about his journey with filmmaking, but you still kind of have to wrestle with the fact that he just hosts anti-Semitic people on his channel. Maybe none of these people are really all that good of guest speakers, but I do think it's pretty fascinating how some of us might have very different opinions on these people. I think the part that we're all thinking but not really speaking out loud is that the perceived intentions of these bad people deeply influence our thoughts about them. I think most of us probably believe that the intentions from somebody like Mark Leda is really just to educate and enlighten people on these marginalized groups of people and how they ended up in a life of drugs, crime, and escorting. I think that most of us believe that the intentions from somebody like Kanye West are not the same, and maybe not good, I would even say. I mean, I wanted to make you think there for a second, but come on, there's something very obviously different between Kanye West and Soft White Underbelly. To me, their intentions behind how they decide to wield their platform and their free speech is what separates them. I don't think that the intentions from Mark Leda are to advocate for or echo the lifestyles of the people that he's interviewing. I think that's just kind of a rare and unavoidable, really, consequence of being on the internet. But Kanye's intentions are clear and unmistakable. Yo philosopher Jason Stanley argues that free speech can be and sometimes is weaponized against democracy. He points to how misinformation, propaganda, and extremist rhetoric actually can thrive under free speech protections. And this raises an important question. I mean, if free speech can be used to harm democratic principles, then should we be reconsidering who gets a platform? Because I don't want to be the free speech police, and to be honest, I actually do kind of understand the sentiment behind, well, if we start putting regulations on things now, then who knows what kind of floodgates we could be opening to a whole new world of bigger problems. But how most things in life are, and how most of my videos end up turning out, I think there's probably a middle ground to be found. You cannot walk into certain places of business without a shirt or shoes. And no, there's not some great t-shirt act of 1974 in America that mandates that. We just give businesses the freedom to set those regulations if they choose to. Think about here on YouTube. Ever since the adpocalypse, I mean, they've set restrictions on what can be monetized and what is considered to be kid-friendly. And if you choose to run your business or platform with full adherence to absolute free speech, then good, more power to you, I guess. I mean, you can do that. That's your freedom. That's your liberty. I can understand that. And I also kind of understand that there's another kind of aspect to this middle ground where some platforms are, yes, letting people say whatever dumbass shit that they want, but they're also flagging it as misinformation. And to be honest, I haven't really looked into how accurate that flagging of the misinformation is, but I have noticed it. Public figures, many of whom are not experts on political or social topics, often share their very poorly thought out opinions about current events. I mean, sure, it's a little hard to really constitute what's like a poorly thought out idea, but I think a lot of us might just have a difference of opinion. But on the other side of this argument, which it's now kind of hitting me as turning into like the art versus artist argument, who the says that we should even be listening to some of the these people say when they have no idea what they're talking about? Is the burden on the person with the platform to just not be a total jackass? Or is it on the audience, or the consumer in this case, to remember that Gwyneth Paltrow is an actress and not a fucking gynecologist? So stop fucking listening to her about goop. Should these people be criticized or even deplatformed when their views contribute to harmful discourse? Or is the responsibility of even being on social media at all include the responsibility to discern between harmful and non-harmful content? The other question is, since platforms do kind of have the ability to set their own regulations and community guidelines, do they also have the right to allow who even gets onto the platform in the first place? For example, if somebody has a criminal or felonious past, should that impact their ability to become an influencer? A study in the International Journal of Research in Sociology and Anthropology highlights how digital platforms can enable criminal behavior by providing anonymity and broad reach. It suggests that platforming people with criminal backgrounds isn't just a theoretical concern, there are real risks involved. I mean, many people are appalled when they learn that Jeffrey Dahmer received fan mail when he was in jail. I mean, he was basically a celebrity, and social media had been around. Well, you do the math. Could we be enabling more bad to happen by just allowing people with hateful intentions to grow their online circle? Maybe. Does that kind of come with the territory of using social media nowadays in America? maybe. I unfortunately don't really have the answer to how to safely run a social media platform while also kind of being respectful towards these foundational principles of free speech. But research has shown that deplatforming hate groups can actually reduce their ability to recruit new members and spread their ideology. It is important to acknowledge that, yeah, actually getting these people off of social media and removing their voice can truly diminish their reach. But I will also acknowledge that, much like the squirrels in my attic after calling the exterminator 3 different times, they will find a way back in. So maybe that solution's kind of like putting a band-aid on a stab wound, and maybe it's not even all that good of a band-aid. Maybe there is some benefit to not immediately taking these people off of social media in the same way that there's benefit when Benson and Stabler go undercover and launch a sting operation rather than just overtly blowing up a spot. I mean, maybe being hidden in plain sight has its advantages, but what would that mean for channels like Soft White Underbelly? A study in the European Journal of Criminology identifies criminogenic features of social media platforms that can facilitate harmful behavior, and this kind of raises concerns about Soft White Underbelly's interviews with rapists, drug dealers, and violent offenders. While some people believe that the channel simply gives an unfiltered look at society's underbelly, some people think that it kind of gives these criminals an undeserving spotlight. And to be clear, not all of these people are criminals in the way that you're probably thinking. I mean, some of these videos do truly just shed light on very unfortunate and depraved circumstances, and I think the aim is to kind of deepen the audience's empathy. I think that channels like Soft White Underbelly and other similar platforms present both this opportunity for education and also this kind of inherent risk for romanticizing crime. Ultimately, the decision to platform or deplatform somebody should probably weigh the benefits of their testimony versus the potential for harm. Society's just gonna have to learn where to draw the line between free speech and responsible platforming, and education versus exploitation. So I'm probably not going to be coming after you if you want to listen to Life of Pablo. I might actually join you, to be honest, but I better not catch you wearing a t-shirt from Easy.com.